Well, my name's Nedra, and as you know, I'm a nurse. It came as a surprise to me that I was going to be a patient, but 3 times in 3 months I found myself in hospital. The first time I had serious neck and shoulder pain. No one knew why. I collapsed, I virtually collapsed with that pain, and I was admitted into the cardiac unit because they thought it might have been a heart problem. My heart rate did go down to 30 and my blood pressure dropped to 70, and I thought I was going to probably die in the A&E department, and they didn't know why. And I prayed and said, oh God, help me, I don't want to end up on a tube or something. And it gradually came up, and they didn't give me the nasty drugs that I was anticipating. But they did watch me, and in the end they decided that they couldn't work out what had happened, and I was okay, my heart was fine. Next one, I was in the SAN, and I had fever with unexplained reasons for it, and they decided I had pneumonia and sent me home on antibiotics, which cleared that bout up. A few weeks later, I was in hospital again, suddenly a big fever with my second bout of pneumonia. And this time it was a 4-week stay, and this time it was very serious. I had some kind of fatal condition, or life-threatening anyway. And that condition was so serious that I was rapidly anemic. I couldn't breathe, I was oxygen dependent, my temp was 39, and my inflammatory markers in my blood had gone off the graph, as had my platelets. I had low protein. They were thinking about giving me a blood transfusion. I was in serious straits. They didn't know why. And I didn't have any phlegm, I wasn't coughing anything up, there was no congestion, and there was no cough. But I had pneumonia, and I had pleural effusions, which were collections of fluid, and a pericardial effusion. So I was seriously ill. I was actually fighting pretty much for my life. And the diagnostic procedures were mutilating me and making me sicker by the moment. I was really so sick I couldn't move without terrible pain. I ended up on morphine, second hourly, and I was on codeine third hourly. So with that cocktail of drugs, plus all the huge doses of antibiotics they were ploughing into me, my liver functions got deranged, and so my liver was shot. And I was also informed that I was now morphine addicted, and that didn't please me greatly either. They had put a tube in and drained some fluid out, but somehow or other, when they took the tube out, it seemed to rip into my flesh, and I was in terrible pain. I'd take a few paces with the physio, and then I'd collapse with the pain just running through my body. And I thought, this is no good. And I remember one night I was praying at midnight, said, Lord, I just desperately need someone to pray with. I feel like I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. And it was 12:30, and I remember this doctor, he put his head around the curtain and said, is there anything I can do for you? And I thought, is this the guy I dare to ask to pray with me? Okay. I said, well, I'm upset. I said, I don't know why this is happening to me, which is a pretty normal reaction when you're in this situation, is why is this happening? Why is God letting this happen? And he said to me, well, you know, only God knows how long a person is to live, and you know, why these things happen. And I thought, oh, phew, you know, he might be a Christian. So I just said to him, well, will you, and as I said, will you pray, he also said, would you like me to? And we both ended up with pray with me. And I knew that God had answered my prayer for someone to pray with me straight away. Another time I was praying for a scarf to bind myself up with, and someone walked in with a scarf. And you know, there were things that I knew God was still with me even though I was in this valley. I was so close to dying that I would hear the angel choirs. I know that sounds weird and I don't even know about what it means, but I was hearing angels singing in, it seemed like heaven. It was huge masses of beautiful music, and it was ringing in my ears constantly, and I thought, my goodness, I'm in another zone. Oh dear. And unfortunately for my visitors, of course, they were all watching me deteriorate in front of them, and they were all thinking privately, and they told me later, bit by bit, person by person, that I was dying, and they didn't understand what was going on. There were thousands, by this time there were thousands of people praying. The little children in Africa that I'd been helping, they were all praying, 8,000 of them. There was this church that I was connected with, and there was about 20,000 praying there. And then there were all these Bible study groups. People I've never met are still telling me, we were praying for you. And of course my father's an atheist, and well, he was a minister, but he's lost his faith, and he was saying, well, if God's got all these people praying, what's he doing? You know, like, and he was pretty angry, and then he said, and if she gets better, he'll get the credit, and that'll be even worse. And later he came to a position of acceptance. He just remembered, maybe he had some faith stir up in him, and he just said, well, he said, you know, at the end of every prayer there should always be not my will but thine be done. And perhaps you need to start accepting that it might be God's will to take you. And I realised he was letting me go, and it had taken some travelling to do that in his own mind and his own heart. Anyway, God wasn't going to leave me in that predicament. I do remember one night, there was a particular night when I had a call from a friend. She said, how are you? I said, I think I'm fighting for my life. And then I said, oh Lord, am I overstating it? And I thought, no, I'm not. And that same night, some presence or angel woke my sister in Queensland and said, you've got to get up and pray. Your sister's fighting for her life. And she got up and prayed. And then my doctor that morning came in to me. She said, I think you've turned the corner a bit, she said, which is a relief. She said, because I took to praying for you last night, and maybe there is someone up there. And so she had been despairing as well. Anyways, at the end of this stay, I was released and considered well enough to go home. And I'd been praying, God, please get me out of here. But I couldn't even imagine how I would get out because I was so oxygen dependent. And when I got out, I felt I'd been delivered, because actually I was getting worse and worse and worse, and I couldn't see any change for the better, and I was worried that we weren't going anywhere. And anyway, when I got out, I immediately got sick again. They'd said to me I had to take a very powerful antibiotic, and they wanted me to take 110 courses of this antibiotic to get the bug that they thought